Welcome today. We're going to continue with this very vibrant discussion about bridging gaps in our Coptic American cultures here in America and maybe in some other countries, as CYC I think is shown in many other countries as well too. With us, our beloved Bishop, His Grace Bishop Youssef of the Diocese of the Southern U.S. We have our lovely panelists, and we're joined by one more. We have with us Eva, and we have with us Tina, and we have with us Miriam as well too. And we want to continue where we left off. And we want to know what's going on in our churches. We said that, that in Egypt, there's a lot of subcultures within the country itself. And all these subcultures now become just merging together into one place called church. And we love our churches. But then we have these subcultures within the church. They're not spread out throughout the country. And sometimes there's a little friction. And sometimes there's misunderstandings. And sometimes we don't know the right word to use. Is saying high class, low class? I know the American culture likes to use politically correct terms. Are we being offensive when we say some of these things? But there are certainly different classes, different backgrounds, and so forth. So Sayyidina, help us so that we can understand what is happening and what we can do to make some positive, changes where changes are needed.
I think the last episode we were speaking towards the end of the episode about maybe parents have excuse when they say don't play with this child, because there is different class here, and they don't want their children to learn I don't know what's the right word here, but a different behavior than the behavior they want to teach their children. So actually you have here wonderful young mothers. I want to hear from them your experience. What do you do with your children, in order to instruct them not to catch this different behavior than what you need to teach or insert in them?
Like for myself, I have 2 kids, and with my toddler I try to have a lot of play dates with other children, because I know no matter what, they're going to be out one day in school and they're going to see other kids behaving a certain way. So I would like to be there to observe and kind of guide somehow. So when I have the play dates, no matter where it is, situation arises where the kid will do something that might not be something that I teach her to do. And when that happens, sometimes what I do, I have 2 options. I go to Eliana, for example, and I tell her, Eliana, you remember Mommy told you we do this way, and I kind of redirect her. And if that does not help, I go to the other kid and I make it out of a game, for example. I'm like, okay, everybody now, before we eat, let's clap our hand and we say, thank you God for the food. And we make it even if they're not religious, we can just something say, thank you, and we pause and kind of let them take a minute to reflect, to learn patience, for example. And other times when she goes to school and she comes back and she picks habits somehow, I remind her, Eliana, I remember Mommy said this because of that. So if I instruct her why the reason we're doing it, it sticks more. I notice with her specifically to do that, versus when I tell her, well, you didn't do this way, then she kind of becomes more stubborn and insists on not doing it. So I know no matter what they're gonna go, someday they're gonna start learning habits and form their own decision. But I know that when they understand why they're doing it, and then they themselves become an instrument to teach others good behavior and kind of go back to the point of gapping the cultures. Then they understand that, no matter what level you're in, we still have values. And
that's wonderful.
I'm going to take it a little bit notch higher, and I'm just going to specify our interactions in church. Yeah. Because in Sunday school, we always tell our kids, well, it's different outside, but church is the safe way to be. Church is where you don't have to be bullied. Church is where you don't have to be looked at differently because of your color, your culture, whatever. We're all the same. And if we preach that, I think we should, practice it. So I love your approach, and it's the approach of not defining. And I think that's what we need to do is, if that was my child, personally, I wouldn't take it upon myself to define the other child and say what the other child is, whatever, lower class, less educated, just came from Egypt, Bob, as we call him.
Labeling the person.
Right, so it's my responsibility not to label the other child because it's a ripple effect. Because the whole entire community is going to do that. But this is not what we should do as a church, right? I mean, if each one of us take that responsibility, obviously it's your role to not put your children in an environment that you don't want them to be influenced bad. But it's also your role to not label other children in the community to be whatever you're going to call them.
That's why when you see a kid doing something specifically that might not meet your criteria, you do not say, well, he's doing it because of this and this and this. That's, you know what I mean? Because he's whatever.
But sometimes if there's just too many differences, like say in the saying, then you know, like in the last episode, Sadna said, well, if you're going to pick, you know, here's the example of, you know, different fruits. You're going to choose this one, you're not going to choose this one. But sometimes if you see certain behaviors and then your child is starting to mimic these behaviors, you want to put some brakes on. I used to always tell my kids, you know, when you get on the highway, yes, I know when I get on the highway, there's a slow lane, there's a middle lane, there's a fast lane. That's the same thing with relationships. Some relationships you just got to go at a different pace a little bit. But so maybe that's, you know, what Sadna's saying. He's not saying totally reject them, but you know, kind of, because if that behavior is going to influence your child.
Yes, totally. We should not reject anybody. We should accept everybody, as St. Paul taught us in the letter to Romans, accept one another as the Lord Jesus Christ accept us. But I just here I want to differentiate between labeling the person and labeling the behavior. You know, definitely we should not label any person. You know, because who am I to label any person? But I think it is our right and our responsibility actually to label if there is inappropriate behavior, and we say how this behavior is inappropriate, and actually we need actually to not to follow this inappropriate behavior. So big difference between labeling the person, which we should not define any person and giving him a name or a label, but I think it's our responsibility also to discern between what is good and bad, what's right and what's wrong. And St. Paul in Hebrews chapter 5, he made this a sign of maturity, the ability to discern between right and wrong. Actually, this is a sign of spiritual maturity.
I just wanted to also add to what Eva was saying as well, that, you know, sometimes if we don't understand the other culture or we don't understand the other kids, it's hard for us to judge. Like we find that we're labeling them as a fob, but we don't really understand what it is, why they're so different. Like for example, I grew up in Canada, and in Canada we had a lot of Ethiopian Orthodox and Eritrean Orthodox in our church. And it was very hard for us growing up to understand why some of our friends had to dress with some veils and why they have to look like that. And then actually our priest in one of the sermons explained to us that it's an ultimate honor. And this is how much they honor God, that they dress like this, because they like to cover their body. This is how much they respect God. And so we went home, and then we looked up a documentary on Eritrean Orthodox and to see the depth that they go through in terms of how they wear, you start to respect, instead of it being a point that you judge on and you say, why do my friends have to dress like that? You appreciate, and you actually start to wear your own nisharb because you realize how important such a little difference is. So I think if we understand, we're starting at the toddler level, you understand why people dress like that. You understand, you know, we have kids in Sunday school that may talk a little different. They just came from Egypt and they're so used to having, I guess it's a much more buddy. Like you can chit chat with your buddy and tap them on the back. But if you were to do that in the American culture, people think you're weird and they think you're encroaching in their private space. So I think if you understand, and when we went to go visit that child at home, and we started asking him, he started to express to us how this is how he used to deal with his buddies, and he can't make friends like he used to in Egypt here. But it's because he has to interact a little differently. And if we were to understand how his perspective, and he understands our American perspective, sometimes it's much easier to change people when they understand, and it's not just, oh, he's a fob, or it's just they're weird because that's how they dress. So sometimes when you understand, you actually appreciate, and it opens your eyes.
Thanks so much for bringing this issue, because a certain behavior can in one culture is inappropriate,
Yeah.
and actually in this other culture is very appropriate to the extent if you don't do it, it will be inappropriate. Let me give an example. Keeping eye contact, you know. In Egypt, in many subcultures in Egypt, if you keep eye contact with the person to whom you are speaking, especially if you are a female, this means you are not disciplined, you are not polite. You should not keep eye contact. You know, here in America, if you don't keep eye contact, this is a sign of respect. You don't respect the person. You are not looking at his eyes. So, you know, if somebody, for example, from America went to Egypt and they start to keep eye contact, they will consider them impolite, you know. And the opposite, if somebody came from Egypt and here he cannot keep eye contact, you know. And when I say they cannot, yes, they cannot, you know, because all their years they are raised not to keep eye contact, you know. And they don't keep eye contact, you know, they will be perceived, you know, as they don't respect the other person. Yeah. So you brought a very important point, how just teach me about your culture. Yeah. Teach me what does this mean in your culture? Yeah. Because between different cultures, it's big difference.
And maybe it is our responsibility as Sunday school servants to explain the cultures to our own kids. And as mothers as well, it's important to explain those, because had we not stopped and asked the question and started, you know, an issue, I don't think our father of confession, our priest would have explained it to us. So I think it's a job of servants as well to maybe ask the kids, why do you do things this way? Is this how you were brought up, or is this?
You reminded me that a real story happened. You know, one of the little girls, when she went to her school and she was fasting, so she was holding a sandwich of full and no. So actually her peers start to make fun of her because they surprise how she is eating beans as a sandwich, you know. So the little girl went to her mother, and by the way, her mother is American, Coptic American, yeah. So, and she was crying, you know, how, you know, her peers give her a hard time. So the mother actually called the school and she told them, I need 5 minutes in the class. And they give him the 5 minutes, so she explained to them the fasting and our tradition and how the fasting is by the scripture, you know. And this little girl actually, although for her young age, but she's keeping the teaching of the church. And from this moment, actually, everybody respected this little girl and looked high to her, how she is little girl, but she's keeping the commandment of God. And here, just by explaining what's going on, and teaching others about another, I don't say culture because our religion is not culture, and a faith, you know, and practice, spiritual practice, this changes the whole perception of the class toward this little girl.
I find in America we're very visual. Like if we understand something, we won't judge it.
Yeah.
But we just need to understand.
That's right.
And the American culture likes to not be judgmental, because you want to accept. But like as Grace is saying, the more that we understand, then the more, you know, then we can impart that. And also that this mother did a great thing by empowering her child to be able to, you know, she really modeled a wonderful, you know, behavior for her child in the future to not back down when she's, you know, confronted. And she could have been bullied later, but taking that kind of approach was really a wonderful sort of thing. I'll share with you all a very small like activity that we do like at our church. Abuna celebrates the Feast of the Holy Family's entry into Egypt in a very grand way. So what we do like every year is we design every classroom becomes a part of the journey of the Holy Family. And what's lovely about this is that, you know, a lot of these kids are saying, well, that's where my grandparents are from. So, you know, I know a little bit about this or that and so on. So that was also a nice way to kind of bring people together a little bit, and for the kids to themselves, because they have to do everything. You know, the Sunday school servants and other servants can help them, but they themselves actually, you know, do the work, and they have to work together. And many of them will bring things, you know, from their subculture, and everybody loves it, and, you know, and so on. So maybe we can think of, you know, ways to
teach our children about different cultures. For example, if if in my church I have people from Egypt, people from America, people from Sudan, people from Ethiopia, people from Eritrea, maybe in Sunday school, every week, we can speak a little bit about each culture. And this will bring better understanding, so I can understand all these different cultures that are gathered together in the same class.
Definitely, Your Grace, and this will also help us to be closer to each other and to not have, a church of segregated groups or cliques and so forth. I think that the churches will be a lot more productive. Our youth will be happier. They'll have better sense of identity and belonging and so on. Well, we thank you all so much for being with us again. Thank you, Grace, for shedding a lot of light on this. And we're going to start doing some things a little bit differently here in this panel, Tina and Miriam and Eva, but I know you, the viewers, as well, too. Start thinking about being positive, just agents of change. That's what we're going to do. We're going to become agents of change. We're going to make things for the better. We ask you to join us again on another episode of Route 139.